On a rain-soaked evening in Manhattan, 10-year-old Tommy Rivera discovers a briefcase in a dumpster behind an upscale restaurant. Inside, he finds documents worth billions, merger agreements, offshore account details, and evidence of corporate espionage that could destroy Wall Street titan Alexander Montgomery's empire. But when the desperate billionaire tracks Tommy down, offering him any amount of money for the documents' return, the homeless boy's response leaves Montgomery speechless. "I don't want your money, sir. I want you to find my sister. She disappeared from foster care 3 years ago." What Montgomery discovers as he helps Tommy search for his missing sister will uncover a conspiracy far darker than corporate theft, leading straight to the heart of his own family's buried secrets. Like and subscribe to follow this heart-wrenching story about how an abandoned child's simple wish forces a powerful man to confront the true cost of his success. Tommy Rivera had mastered the art of invisibility. At 10 years old, he knew exactly how to blend into the shadows of Manhattan's glittering streets, how to make himself unseen by the well-dressed crowds hurrying past. 3 years of living on the streets had taught him that being noticed usually meant trouble. The dumpster behind Le Cirque was usually a good spot. Wealthy diners often left perfectly good food untouched, and sometimes the kitchen staff would deliberately leave packages of day-old bread near the top. But tonight, as Tommy carefully lifted the heavy lid, he found something very different. The briefcase had clearly been thrown in hastily. Its expensive leather surface was barely scratched, the gold-plated locks still gleaming. Tommy's first instinct was to leave it alone. Street kids learned early that valuable things usually meant dangerous people, but the growing cold and his empty stomach made him reconsider. Maybe there was something inside he could sell. Using the small flashlight he'd found last week, Tommy examined his discovery. The locks had been broken, probably in whatever struggle had led to the briefcase being discarded. Inside, he found stacks of papers covered in words he barely understood. Merger acquisition, offshore accounts, proprietary trading algorithms. But among the corporate documents, something else caught his eye, a newspaper clipping about missing children in the New York foster care system. The article was dated 3 years ago, the same time his sister Maria had disappeared. Tommy was still reading when he heard footsteps approaching. He quickly closed the briefcase, but not fast enough. "Hey, kid! What are you doing back here?" The restaurant's security guard advanced toward him, reaching for his radio. Tommy grabbed the briefcase and ran, his small size allowing him to slip through gaps in the fence that the guard couldn't follow. He didn't stop running until he reached his current home, an abandoned subway maintenance room he'd discovered, accessed through a loose grate in a dead-end alley. The space was small but dry, and most importantly, safe from the authorities who would send him back into the foster system. Under the dim light of his flashlight, Tommy began to really examine the contents of the briefcase. Though he couldn't understand most of the documents, he could read enough to know they were important, very important. His suspicions were confirmed the next morning when he saw the news. Alexander Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Global Investments, was offering a $1 million reward for the return of a stolen briefcase and its contents. No questions asked. The photo accompanying the story showed a stern-faced man in his 50s, standing in front of a gleaming skyscraper. But what caught Tommy's attention was the smaller photo beside it, a charity gala from last month, showing Montgomery with the city's chief of police and several prominent politicians. Tommy recognized one of them, Senator Williams, who had chaired the committee investigating irregularities in the foster care system 3 years ago, the investigation that had mysteriously ended just after Maria disappeared. Looking more closely at the newspaper clipping he'd found in the briefcase, Tommy noticed something he'd missed before. In the photo accompanying the article about missing foster children, partially visible in the background, was a car. a distinctive black Rolls-Royce with custom plates. The same car he'd seen parked outside the group home the day Maria vanished. The same car that was now pulling up to the curb just outside his alley. Tommy pressed himself deeper into the shadows as Alexander Montgomery himself stepped out, accompanied by two large men in suits. The billionaire looked different in person, tired, anxious, almost afraid. "He has to be around here somewhere," Montgomery was saying. "The tracking device in the briefcase leads right to this spot." Tommy's heart raced. He looked at the briefcase and now saw it, a tiny, blinking light beneath the handle that he'd mistaken for a decorative element. "Find him," Montgomery ordered his men. "Those documents cannot get out. Everything I've built depends on—" He stopped suddenly, looking directly at Tommy's hiding spot. Their eyes met through the gloom of the alley. "Wait," Montgomery called to his men. "Let me handle this." As the billionaire approached, Tommy clutched the briefcase tightly. He had a feeling he knew why these documents were so important and why they might be his only chance to find out what really happened to his sister. "Hello, young man," Montgomery said softly, crouching down to Tommy's level. "I believe you have something that belongs to me. I'll give you $2 million cash, right now," Montgomery said, reaching for the briefcase. "No questions asked. You can start a new life, have everything you've ever wanted." Tommy pulled back, keeping the briefcase close. "You're friends with Senator Williams?" Montgomery's expression shifted subtly. "We serve on several charitable boards together. Why?" 3 years ago, he was investigating missing kids in foster care. Then suddenly the investigation stopped, right after my sister disappeared. "I don't see what that has to do with my documents," Montgomery said carefully, but Tommy noticed his hand trembling slightly. "Your car was there," Tommy continued, "the day Maria vanished. Your Rolls-Royce with the custom plates, MGI 1953. I saw it parked outside our group home." Montgomery's face paled. "You must be mistaken." "Am I?" Tommy opened the briefcase and pulled out a specific document. "This says something about Project Guardian and has a list of group homes. Our home is on this list, and there are payments, big payments, to someone called the Facilitator." The billionaire's calm facade cracked. He glanced nervously at his men, who were watching from the alley entrance. "You're a clever boy," Montgomery said quietly. "Too clever. Those documents are complicated business matters that you couldn't possibly understand." "I understand enough," Tommy replied. "I understand that rich people don't usually pay millions of dollars to group homes unless they're getting something in return. And I understand that my sister didn't just run away like they told us." Montgomery was silent for a long moment, studying Tommy with new eyes. "What do you want?" "Help me find Maria. Use your connections, your money, whatever it takes. Help me find my sister and I'll give you back your documents." "It's not that simple," Montgomery began, but Tommy cut him off. "Yes, it is. You help me, you get your papers back. You don't help me." He pulled out his lighter, holding it close to the briefcase. "Well, I may not understand all these big words, but I bet they burn just fine." "Don't." Montgomery's voice cracked with genuine fear. "You don't know what you're dealing with. These people, the ones behind Project Guardian, they're dangerous. They've killed to keep this quiet." "More dangerous than living on the streets? More dangerous than not knowing if my sister is alive or dead?" Tommy's voice trembled but held firm. "I've got nothing left to lose, Mr. Montgomery. Do you?" The billionaire looked at the boy before him, really looked at him for the first time. He saw not just a homeless child, but a brother who had spent 3 years searching for answers that everyone else wanted to keep buried. "If I help you," Montgomery said slowly, "it won't just be dangerous. It will destroy people in the highest levels of power. It could tear this city apart." "Maybe it needs to be torn apart," Tommy replied. Maybe that's the only way to find the truth. Montgomery stood, brushing dirt from his expensive suit. He took out his phone and made a call. Janet? Cancel my meetings for the next week, all of them, and contact Helen. Tell her Project Guardian has been compromised. She'll know what that means. He turned back to Tommy. I'll help you find your sister. But first, there's something you need to know about Project Guardian, about why those group homes were chosen. It wasn't random. Every child who disappeared, they all had something in common, something that makes them very valuable to very powerful people. What do you mean? Your sister, Tommy. Did she ever do anything unusual, anything that couldn't be explained? Tommy hesitated, then nodded slowly. She could do things, move things without touching them, know things before they happened. That's why they separated us. They said she needed special care. Special care, Montgomery repeated bitterly. That's what they called it. But really, they were collecting them. Children with gifts, building an army of them, and your sister, she was supposed to be their crown jewel. Montgomery took Tommy to his penthouse apartment, 50 stories above Manhattan. As they rode up in the private elevator, the billionaire explained more about Project Guardian. It started in the 1980s, he said. Scientists discovered certain children were being born with abilities, gifts that defied explanation. The government wanted to study them, but they needed a way to identify and collect these children without raising suspicion. So they used the foster care system, Tommy said quietly. Yes, they created a network of special group homes, places where they could observe children, test them. When they found one with abilities, they would stage a disappearance. The child would be taken to a facility for training. In Montgomery's study, he pulled up files on his computer. Pictures of children appeared on the screen, dozens of them, all listed as runaways or missing from foster care. Maria wasn't the first, Montgomery continued, but she was different. Most children showed one specific ability: telekinesis, precognition, telepathy. Your sister demonstrated multiple gifts. They called her a prime. But why are you involved? Tommy asked. What's in those documents that's so important? Montgomery's face darkened. Because I helped create Project Guardian, not willingly at first. They approached me 15 years ago, threatened to destroy my company unless I helped finance their operation. But then I saw what these children could do, the power they represented. He trailed off, shame evident in his expression. I convinced myself it was for the greater good, that these children would be better off being trained to use their gifts. But the truth is, I just wanted the power they offered, the ability to see the future, to know what your competitors are thinking. It was irresistible. Where did they take them? Tommy demanded. A facility upstate, the Dover Institute. Officially, it's a private school for gifted children. In reality, Montgomery pulled up another file showing a massive underground complex. It's a training center, research facility, and prison all in one. We have to get her out. It's not that simple. The facility is heavily guarded, and the children, they're not the same anymore. The training program changes them. Some lose their humanity entirely. Tommy felt tears burning in his eyes. Is that what they did to Maria? I don't know, Montgomery admitted. I've never been allowed inside, but there might be a way. The documents you found, they're not just about Project Guardian. They contain evidence of something much worse, the real reason they're collecting these children. He opened the briefcase and pulled out a specific file. They're building an army, yes, but not for defense. They're planning to use these children to take control of the government, the economy, everything, and they're almost ready. The final phase begins next week. How do you know all this? Because my daughter Emily is one of them. She showed signs of telepathy when she was young. I thought I could protect her by cooperating with them. Instead, they took her anyway, said it was for her own good. Montgomery's voice broke. I haven't seen her in 5 years, but last month she managed to contact me mentally. She showed me what they're planning, helped me steal these documents as proof. But before I could expose everything, they caught her. That's why they tried to steal the briefcase back. Tommy looked at the photos of the facility again. So how do we get in? We don't, Montgomery said. But you might be able to. There's something else you should know, Tommy. Something about why you and Maria were separated. Have you ever noticed anything different about yourself? Tommy thought about the times he'd wished for food and found it appearing mysteriously in his hiding spots. The way he could become invisible when he really needed to. The strange dreams that always seemed to come true. The tests they did at the group home, Montgomery continued. They showed you had abilities too. Not as strong as Maria's, but significant. They were planning to take you as well. But the night before they could, you ran away. They've been looking for you ever since. So I'm like her? I have powers? Yes. And that might be our way in. They're always looking for new recruits. If you were to get caught deliberately this time, they'd take me to the facility, Tommy finished. To Maria. It's incredibly dangerous, Montgomery warned, if they realize why you're really there. I don't care, Tommy said firmly. She's my sister. I'm getting her out. As they began planning the dangerous infiltration, neither of them noticed the small red light blinking under Montgomery's desk. A surveillance device monitoring every word. In a dark room miles away, someone was listening, smiling coldly as they set their own plans in motion. The plan was set in motion a week later. Tommy stood shivering in the rain outside another group home on Project Guardian's list, making himself visible enough to be noticed. It didn't take long. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled up. 2 men in suits emerged, approaching him with practiced casualness. Tommy pretended to run, making sure to trip and fall just as they reached for him. Subject acquired, one man said into his radio. Confirming identity, yes, it's the Rivera boy. Level 3 potential, previously escaped containment. They were surprisingly gentle as they helped him into the vehicle. One even offered him a blanket and hot chocolate. Tommy remembered Montgomery's warning. They'll try to make you feel safe, special. Don't trust any of it. The drive took several hours. Tommy kept track of the turns as they'd planned, though he knew Montgomery was following at a safe distance, tracking the small device hidden in Tommy's shoe. The Dover Institute looked exactly like its photos, a sprawling campus of brick buildings surrounded by manicured lawns. But Tommy could feel something wrong about the place, and heaviness in the air that made his skin crawl. Welcome to your new home. A woman in a lab coat greeted him as they entered the main building. I'm Dr. Helen Carter. We've been looking for you for a very long time, Tommy. Tommy recognized her name from Montgomery's files. She was the program's director, the one they called the facilitator. Where's my sister? He demanded, playing his part. I know she's here. All in good time, Dr. Carter smiled. First, we need to evaluate your abilities, see how much they've developed on their own. The evaluation took place in a sterile white room. They attached sensors to his head, asked him to move objects with his mind, to predict the symbols on cards before they were turned over. Tommy deliberately failed most tests while showing just enough potential to keep their interest. Interesting, Dr. Carter murmured, reviewing his results. Your abilities are unfocused, but the potential is there. With proper training, I want to see Maria, Tommy insisted. Dr. Carter's smile tightened slightly. Your sister is in advanced training. Visits must be earned through progress in your own development. They led him to a dormitory room. painted in soothing colors, but with cameras visible in every corner. As soon as he was alone, Tommy closed his eyes, concentrating the way Montgomery had taught him. "Maria," he thought as hard as he could. "It's Tommy, I'm here." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then suddenly his head filled with a familiar presence, warm, loving, but tinged with fear. "Tommy. Oh God, Tommy, you shouldn't have come. It's a trap." "I know," he thought back. "We're here to get you out. All of you." "You don't understand." Maria's mental voice was desperate. "They know you're coming. They've known for days. Montgomery's daughter, Emily. She didn't escape their control. They made her contact him, made her help him steal those documents. It was all a setup." Tommy's blood ran cold. "But why?" "Because they needed both of us. Twins with multiple abilities. We're the key to their whole plan. They've been waiting for you to find me, and now—" The door burst open. Dr. Carter entered, but her friendly demeanor was gone. Behind her stood Emily Montgomery, her eyes blank and glowing with an unnatural light. "Well done, Emily," Dr. Carter said. "Your father played his part perfectly. His guilt over losing you made him so easy to manipulate." "Where is he?" Tommy demanded. "What have you done to him?" "Mr. Montgomery is currently being reprogrammed to be more cooperative, just like Emily was, just like Maria, and soon, just like you." Tommy reached for his powers, trying to defend himself, but Emily raised her hand. Invisible forces pinned him to the wall. "Don't fight it, Tommy," Dr. Carter said soothingly. "Once the reconditioning is complete, you'll understand. You and Maria together will help us reshape the world." As they dragged him away, Tommy managed one final, desperate mental cry. "Maria! The briefcase! Remember the briefcase!" Because what no one knew, what even Montgomery didn't know, was that Tommy had made copies of all the documents. Copies he'd hidden throughout the city, set to be delivered to every major news outlet if he didn't check in every 24 hours. The truth about Project Guardian was about to be exposed, whether they were ready or not. The reconditioning chamber was a nightmare of white walls and humming machines. As they strapped Tommy down, Dr. Carter explained the process with clinical detachment. The procedure realigns neural pathways, strengthening abilities while removing problematic emotions, family connections, for instance, personal will, things that might interfere with your training. But even as she spoke, something extraordinary was happening. Throughout the facility, other children were stirring, awakening. Maria hadn't just heard Tommy's last mental cry, she'd broadcast it to every gifted child in the building. In the security center, monitors showed chaos erupting across the compound. Children were breaking free of their programming, their combined powers overwhelming their handlers. The guards' weapons turned to dust in their hands. Doors ripped off their hinges. The very walls began to shake. "What's happening?" Dr. Carter demanded, rushing to a computer terminal. "This is impossible! The conditioning ... was never as complete as you thought," came a voice from the doorway. Maria stood there, her eyes blazing with power. Behind her was Alexander Montgomery, very much not reconditioned, and Emily, now free of her blank stare. "Did you really think I couldn't tell the difference between my own daughter's mental contact and your crude manipulation?" Montgomery asked. "Emily reached me months ago, helped me plan all of this. We just needed to find Tommy first. The briefcase, the documents, the tracking device. It was all a setup," Emily explained, "a way to get inside while making you think you were the ones in control." Dr. Carter lunged for an alarm button, but Tommy, now free of his restraints, raised his hand. The entire control panel crumbled to fragments. "That's new," he said, surprised at his own power. "Your abilities were never weak," Maria explained, hugging him tightly. "They were just waiting for the right moment, for us to be together again." The facility was now in full rebellion. Through the windows, they could see vans arriving, not military or police, but news crews. Dozens of them, all responding to the anonymous tips and document deliveries they'd just received. "It's over," Montgomery said to Dr. Carter. "Project Guardian, the reconditioning, all of it. The world will know everything." "You fool," Carter snarled. "We were giving these children purpose, teaching them to use their gifts for the greater good." "No," Maria said firmly. "You were trying to turn us into weapons. But our gifts aren't for fighting or controlling others. They're for helping, for healing, for making the world better." As if to prove her point, she and Tommy joined hands. A wave of energy pulsed out from them, spreading through the facility. Everywhere it touched, the children's artificial conditioning dissolved, replaced by clarity and understanding. 1 year later, the Dover Institute was transformed. Under new leadership, a council of the gifted children themselves, with Montgomery and other reformed adults as advisors, it became a true school. One where special children could learn to use their abilities safely, ethically, and most importantly, by choice. Tommy and Maria, now reunited and living with Montgomery, who had legally adopted them both, helped develop a new curriculum. One that taught not just control of powers, but the responsibility that came with them. The other children from Project Guardian were given choices to stay and learn, to return to their families, or to forge their own paths. Many chose to stay, wanting to ensure no other children would suffer as they had. Emily, fully recovered, worked alongside her father to dismantle the corrupt networks that had enabled Project Guardian. Their evidence led to hundreds of arrests, reaching into the highest levels of government and business. As for Dr. Carter and her associates, they faced justice not only in courts of law, but in the court of public opinion. The world had to grapple with the reality of gifted children, but seeing them as victims of exploitation rather than weapons of power helped ease the transition. On the anniversary of his escape, Tommy stood with Maria on the Institute's roof, watching new students arrive below. Children who could now develop their gifts in safety and freedom. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked her. "Using your powers to help expose everything?" Maria smiled, taking his hand. "Never. Sometimes the greatest power isn't in keeping secrets, but in telling the truth." Together, they had transformed a nightmare into a dream, proving that the strongest abilities aren't the ones that control or destroy, but those that protect and unite. The twins who were meant to be weapons had instead become bridges, helping to build a future where being different meant being special, not being afraid.